that not only what does it need, but what does it not need. It doesn't actually, in Lily's case, at this moment in time, need that much in terms of its organization. It's looking really quite wonderful, and in fact, Lily was looking quite wonderful before we ever started working on her, not just today, but I've done a few sessions with Lily. She started in a good place. She does yoga, so she's keeping herself organized as she goes along, and yet there were still areas where we feel we could have made some improvements. And we've looked at this sort of from a long-term perspective, and we're about halfway into the work that we want to do, and so there is a point where we will say, okay, we've gone through X number of sessions, we've reached a point of organization that we will call a plateau, and she may come back and do more Rolfing, she may not. And there's always a potential for higher and higher levels of organization, but they get finer and finer and finer. It gets much more difficult to make something better if it's already really good. So it's more challenging when someone like Lily shows up, because she already starts real good. I have to figure out, how can I make this better? Where can I find where there might be a restriction or there might be an imbalance, so that I can feel where I can free that opportunity for something better to happen. Into the visceral compartment and the implication on the organs. When the organs are restricted, they don't function as well. When we can alleviate restriction in the abdominal cavity or the visceral compartment, we allow organs to function better. So the body is doing the work. I'm simply removing the restriction from the body to allow it to do what it naturally knows how to do, which is heal itself. The distinction in many different healing modalities is that we're allowing a natural function by simply alleviating where that natural function has been interrupted. And we find this depth of intelligence is not only the physical intelligence, but also the emotional, psychological, and spiritual intelligence, the sense of our belonging to the larger whole and our placement within that and our purpose within that. All of these implications that are in many ways written into the fabric of our being, the tissue of the self and the material of the body. The body, of course, essentially from the earth. Its nature is of the earth and from the earth. Our nature as non-physical reality is also allowed to revert to its normal way of being, free from an illusion of separation, free from being compartmentalized, of being apart from, or of one part being separate from the other part. So always Dr. Rolf was looking at relationships. We're looking now at the relationship of the hip, the pelvis, the space between the rib cage and the pelvis, the shoulder girdle, the spine itself. Now the implication moves out into the extremities. How are we affecting the elbow, the wrist, the knee, the ankle, the neck? We're always working on the entire system, even though it looks like we're working on a part. That, if anything, is what Dr. Rolf was in many ways the pioneer of recognizing there is no such thing as a part of the body. When we look at a lot of our modern medical intervention, it is always about separating apart some part which is not functioning and then treating that part. Working down the iliotibial band, the tensor fascia lata, it's the main lateral architectural support for the knee. It is also implicate in the hip because it attaches onto the gluteus medius. So the gluteus medius is obviously part of the grouping of muscles that is responsible for the integrity of the hip. So again, this beautiful dance of relationships. When I change something here, it guides me to where the body wants to be changed down here, and then potentially we want to come all the way down and follow that line, because now we're into the peroneal compartment of the leg and the lateral. And then we notice that we're always have, so far as I've been working with Lily right now, I've been working with this lateral line. I've been working this line which is continuous all the way up, all the way through. And indeed what we're going to have to recognize is that any changes that have been initiated by this very small amount of work. Chakra is literally a Sanskrit word for energy center. So one way of looking at our individual self is through this template of these energy centers, this one being located at the base of the spine, slightly below the navel, slightly above the navel. So each center implicitly has a particular energy that it is in a sense responsible for directing in through the body, through the psyche. So if we start at the base of the spine, we're really talking about survival, energy that we need to survive as an organism, very often characterized by fear and anxiety in its negative sense, meaning that fear is appropriate when we need it to survive, is not appropriate if it is simply overwhelming the system unnecessarily. Here we have emotions and sexuality, the reproduction, the survival of the species. The third chakra, which is slightly between or below the sternum, below the breastbone, is characterized by our will. What are we willing? How are we willing? How are we directing our life force through that will center? What we will do, what we won't do. The fourth chakra, which is located at the heart, characterized by the beautiful green color, very often where we recognize that these are now the qualities of the more highly evolved human being. This is the compassion center, also unconditional love. The fifth center in the throat we would think of as communication, communication of our truth, communication from our higher self, communication to the world, communication of our physical range of experience. The sixth chakra, classically known as the third eye in the center of the forehead, where we receive vision, where we have the broadcast of how we see things broad spectrum, the vision that we have for ourselves, the vision that we have for the world. And at the top of the head, the crown center is characterized by our wisdom and the entrance for the energy of the non-physical being into the body. And of course, all the way down through the center is the channel that connects all of these energy centers. At the physical level, we would simply see this as the spine. We can overlap this image onto the individual image in the spine, and in fact the Rolfing line is what we're looking at when everything is organized appropriately. Now we're looking at where one reality bleeds into the next, meaning that if I am in some degree of distortion at the physical level, posturally or otherwise, how does it affect how my energy is running through the energy system? So we're getting into chicken and egg stories here. When the energy system goes off balance, how does it affect the body? When the body goes off balance, how does it affect the energy system? And yes, both are true. Any entry point of disorder will gradually affect every other system. Conversely, when we input order into the system, it has an effect on every other system. So when people say, what should I do first? Should I do acupuncture? Should I do yoga? Should I do chiropractic? Should I do Ayurvedic? Should I change my diet? Should I? Doesn't matter, because if we're doing something positive, it is going to have a positive implication all the way through the various different systems. And one positive change will normally lead to the next positive change. In the same way, one negative change will normally lead to the next negative change. So we're constantly rebalancing moment to moment to moment. This is a dance of who and how we are, not only at the physical level, but at every other level of our beingness.
I feel that connected to my heart for sure.
Yep. And of course, it's, you know, the heart chakra is right here. So we've got an energetic implication, we've got a structural implication, we've got an acupuncture implication. If we talk to some other healing modality, we would find another implication of different overlays of systems that orchestrate all the way through, and it's simply, this is an access route. If we worked with an acupuncturist, they'd be putting needles in here. I'm doing it with my fingers, and a chiropractor would be looking at the subluxation, and so on and so forth. Awareness with the crystal bed treatment. So, simplistically, we're going to call this chromotherapy, because that is what it is. It's the application of light through quartz crystal directed at, once again, the chakra system or the energy system of the body, but also the energy system of the body relates to the endocrine system of the body. So we have the pituitary, we have the pineal, we have the thyroid, we have the thymus, we have the adrenals, we have the reproductive organs, etc. So each organ or each endocrine system is related to an energy system, each energy system is related to an endocrine function. Each colored light relates to both. So the overall application of light through quartz crystals is designed to raise the frequency of the energy centers and the endocrine system itself. When we look at matter, all matter is energy. When we look at energy, all energy is frequency. The question is, which is a healthy, harmonious frequency where we could say something is in balance, in order, functioning at its highest level? And we can determine that when we look at one particular organ or our overall sense. We know when we are feeling good, we are feeling well. When our frequencies are balanced, when they are calibrated to the best of our knowledge and ability, we say, I feel great. When something drops off, we could measure something in the body, the frequency would have dropped a little, whether it's at the organ level, the endocrine level, the oxygen level, the nutrient intake, the etc., etc., etc. So this is one way to input into the system. We talked earlier about any way that you input positive energy into the system, it will affect every other system positively. When we input energy negatively, if we eat something that's not right for us, if we absorb negative emotion, if we absorb criticism, if there is some input into the system in a negative fashion, and that can also be an impact, where we call it an injury, then that will negatively affect all the systems until we find a way to recharge or rebalance that input. This is one way to positively raise the frequency of the entire organism. It's convenient when we have an assault on one part of the body, because we can determine, well, that's the assault, this is where it happened, this is what hurts. When we have an emotional assault, when we are experiencing someone who is directing negative energy towards us for whatever reason, whether they're angry, whether they're shaming us, whether they're telling us we're no good, whether they're belittling us, that impact is not so easy to identify, because it goes into the emotional body and it has an implication on all the other parts of who we are. First of all, at the fluid level, the water of our body observes that first feeling of what that means for us. And if we believe that we eventually are not lovable, or we are not good enough, or we're not big enough, or we're not spiritual enough, or whatever we assume, that shock can penetrate and implant itself into many of the different systems of the body. Physically, emotionally, energetically, endocrine system, organ system, everything changes frequency to accommodate that which wasn't true or which we absorbed from the environment around us. And that is also experienced in the connective tissue system. And so if you continually tell a child that they're not good enough and they're not doing this and that, you will see the structure change. You will see them accommodate that energy, and they will reflect that as not being enough, and eventually that becomes who they are. It's their identification. Or what we would call the traumas of our times, sexual abuse being one, unfortunately. Yes, the initial assault may be to the second chakra, the sexual reproductive center. It's also an assault to the first chakra, the survival mechanism, that mechanism which determines boundaries of, this is who I am, this is when I'm saying yes to something, this is when I'm saying no to something. When the assault has gone beyond the boundary where we are saying no and we are forced to receive something because that no is not being accepted, that is an assault, whether it's sexual, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical, psychological. Sexual, of course, where there is any type of penetration at the physical level, is the most intense. It affects every system, our will center, what we are willing to do, what we're willing to put up with, our sense of unconditional love, compassion for ourselves, for those around us, the communication center where we're saying no and it's not being heard, where we're perhaps forced to block off that communication, where we're trying to say something and can't, and our vision is also distorted in the sense of ultimately who I am. This is who I am. Everything is impacted at every level. Early in life, we're told to, sit down and be quiet. Children should be seen and not heard. All these implications of being quiet, where you had to conform to some standard of when it was okay to speak, when you should.